Hello, this is psychologist Yulia Latunenko, and today our topic is about money, about wealth. Why aren't you rich yet? What prevents people from being successful and wealthy in general? Let's talk about this today. Well, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do so. There is a lot of useful material on psychology here. Give this video a like, don't forget, and write comments with more than 7 words. So why aren't you rich yet? What's holding you back? Let's talk today about the reasons, and I'll give you some advice in this video. So, the first reason I see is stereotypical thinking. Very often in childhood, our parents instill certain stereotypes in us that later ruin our lives, prevent us from becoming rich and successful, and from building relationships. And now, regarding money, I'll name some of the most common stereotypes for you. For example, my clients tell me about the following things. What did their parents instill in them during childhood? For instance, you're a spendthrift, you don't know how to spend money properly. What does this lead to? It leads to the fact that later in adult life, a person cannot allow themselves to buy something just for pleasure. After such a purchase, a person always feels guilty, starts beating themselves up, and begins to doubt whether they should return the purchase back to the store. And these are such profound and deeply unsettling torments. Instead of truly enjoying the new and exciting things that come our way, instead of fully appreciating and getting genuine pleasure from the numerous opportunities that money generously provides us with. The next stereotype I've encountered among my clients is this. People don't have money to pay for your service. People don't have money to buy your product, what you produce. And then people set a very low price for their product, or they're afraid to ask for the price for their service that they would actually like. And this leads to poverty. But I've noticed, even from my own experience, that the higher the price, of course, it shouldn't be astronomical, just roughly in line with the market. You set the price for the product you're selling, and you set it a bit higher than the market average. And I noticed that the more I internally agreed with myself on this higher price, the more clients came to me. The more expensive the product, the better it is perceived by clients. I mean, this kind of intellectual product. Maybe it's not like this in every field. It works, but you should value your work in such a way that the price brings you satisfaction so that you enjoy doing what you do. In other words, the compensation should be worthy of your work. Another stereotype I've heard from my clients is that money is earned through hard work. People having this stereotype in their heads are afraid and don't wish to work. They avoid work. It seems to them that any job is hard, even an easy one. They will consider any job to be hard work because this stereotype is stuck in their minds. Well, here are 2 more stereotypes that parents might give to their child. Without us, you won't succeed at anything. And in this way, they block the creative energy of the child, who then grows up and becomes an adult. Creative energy is blocked because the person believes that they are incapable of anything on their own. They are afraid to take responsibility, afraid to take risks, because without their parents, without external support, they believe they won't succeed at anything. Or here's another one. It's impossible to earn big money honestly. But still, I believe that's not true and that it is possible. And here you also need to define, what does big money mean to you, and what did your parents mean when they said big money? There's a lot of envy in this stereotype. A sense of powerlessness too. That's why people who hold this kind of stereotype block the flow of money, as they say, block their own success, and end up doing nothing at all. If you hold such negative stereotypes about wealth and money, of course you won't want to do anything in that direction. I recommend that you identify your own negative stereotypes, the ones you've carried into your adult life from childhood, the ones given to you by your parents, grandmothers, and grandfathers. And write down for each of these negative stereotypes 3 to 5 counterexamples. That is the opposite point of view. For example, you're a spendthrift, you don't know how to manage money. You can write, I know how to spend money wisely and enjoy these expenses, and so on. The second significant reason I identify for precisely why you simply can't earn enough money, why you truly suffer from your persistent poverty, from a profound lack of essential material resources, is the pervasive fear of loss, the deep-seated fear of losing your hard-earned money. This is fundamentally a scarcity mindset, which often leads to greed, to extreme frugality, to a person's constant obsession with those red price tags. A person's entire and complete life and all their precious energy are often focused intently on finding these small discounts, on diligently saving just 5 kopecks somewhere. But consider this. You could instead direct that valuable energy toward the more productive goal of earning significantly more money. And when you're afraid of losing money, you're really just holding on to a small bird in your hand, while the crane in the sky flies into someone else's hands. That's precisely why it's a widely acknowledged fact that financially prosperous people generally have a much greater capacity for taking on significant financial risk. This is often more pronounced than their inherent fear of potentially losing money or experiencing financial setbacks. And from my own experience, I've noticed that when you cling to clients, break your own boundaries, agree to absolutely unacceptable terms just because you're afraid of losing a client, you end up creating codependent relationships with clients, which leads to a decline in the results of psychotherapy. That's something I've observed in my work, and a long time ago, I let go of the fear of losing a client. And when I realized that the less I feared losing a client, the more clients I had, and the better it was. My financial situation improved, and that really surprised me. That's why I'm sharing this experience with you. The less you are afraid of losing, the more money you will have. Because in reality, your energy isn't spent on holding on, clinging, or staying tense just to avoid losing a little money. But instead, it's directed toward developing your business, being a creative and spontaneous person, and having inspiration. All of that also requires a lot of vital energy. The third thing I would mention, thank you. One of the significant reasons for persistent poverty and the inability to truly achieve material success is often deeply rooted negative thinking. When a person saves money, it seems like they have some wealth, but if they save money thinking it's for a rainy day or for some illness, that's exactly what ends up happening. Because whatever you save for, that's what you'll end up spending it on. Of course, I'm not saying that you shouldn't save at all. Everyone should have some kind of safety cushion. That's sensible, but to focus on thoughts like saving only for a rainy day, for medicine, for helplessness, or for some serious illness, that to me seems it truly spoils the essential energy, the vital inspiration that should genuinely drive a person's continuous growth in terms of achieving success and earning a substantial amount of money. And negative thoughts, such as, I absolutely won't succeed, or a profound lack of genuine faith in yourself and your potential future, these deeply ingrained beliefs also very seriously undermine a person's overall material development and progress. The next crucial thing I particularly wanted to draw your valuable attention to is a lack of psychological development, because, as I mentioned, your material success depends greatly on your mindset, your consciousness, your ability to communicate with people, your ability to understand your own feelings and needs as well as those of others, to be empathetic. Emotional intelligence, in fact. Even more than mental intelligence, it helps you earn enough money so that you are satisfied with your life. But if you don't develop yourself, don't invest, don't put effort into your own growth, then even if you manage to earn some money, there will be these ups and downs. Failures, success, failure, success. It won't be as stable as it is for a person who is very clearly aware of their goals and the results they want to achieve. A person who knows how to focus not only on results, but also on the process. To work based on interest, there is such a feeling. In order to be aware of your feelings, you need to develop your emotional intelligence. Let's move on. What other reasons are there that people can't earn enough money, feel helpless, and don't believe in themselves? Of course, underlying all of this are childhood traumas. And we need to understand that much of what drives our adult lives, we inherited from our parents, grandmothers, and grandfathers. All of these are childhood traumas. And then there's a feeling like shame, which is instilled in a child from a very young age. When parents manipulate with shame, condemnation, ridicule, judgments, and criticism, the child develops such a strong sense of shame, worrying about what people will say, how they will look at them, how they will appear. Shame is the strongest block that prevents a person from earning money. Because when we strive for success, there are risks involved. We might fall to our knees, we might fail. All of that is experience, even if it's negative. But people who carry shame are very, very afraid to fall, to be losers, especially when there are witnesses to their failure. Shame can simply overwhelm a person so much that they become almost paralyzed, sitting at home and doing nothing. Because of shame, we also have low self-esteem. These things are connected because a person with low self-esteem is ashamed of themselves. This leads to a fear of ending up in a situation where, according to the person's imagination, that shame could occur. And the person starts avoiding opportunities to experience shame or embarrassment. Sorry, anything can happen in business. While you are truly on your significant journey to achieving success, you may inevitably face various judgments, harsh criticism, and numerous things that you might genuinely perceive as your own personal incompetence. But it is important to remember that every professional truly grows and develops from their mistakes, not merely from applause or constant praise. That's why to make money, you have to be willing to risk experiencing shame. Shame is also connected to perfectionism. There can also be imposter syndrome, which drains a lot of energy from a person. They are afraid of being exposed and feeling ashamed that they are not who they claim to be. But all of this is just in a person's imagination, in their mind, and it drains their strength and energy, blocks their creativity, and of course, such a person will not work to their full potential. They won't be able to fully unfold all their abilities because so much energy is spent on holding back these negative feelings. That is, people who live without the right to make mistakes are people with low self-esteem who feel a strong sense of shame. And these are people who have in their history childhood traumas related to criticism, remarks, ridicule, and judgment from their parents. In their upbringing, it was specifically narcissistic mistakes made by the adults around the child. Once, I think it was at Harvard University, I'm not completely sure, so I won't say for certain, but from memory, I believe it was at Harvard. An experiment was conducted where they surveyed students, graduates. They were asked one question: how do you see your future in 10 years? 95% of the graduates described their future vaguely, and only 5% described it absolutely clearly and distinctly. And then another 10 years later, when the scientists contacted the participants again, it turned out that the 5% who had described their future clearly and distinctly were several times more successful than the 95% who had described it vaguely and unclearly. Therefore, if you truly have a dream to become rich, to earn your very first million, you need to clearly and precisely understand why you want that million. What exactly will you really do if you have a million? Ask yourself this question and give an honest and sincere answer. And now the last thing. Dreams about the result often get in the way of the process. What I have encountered in the stories of my clients who had difficulties with making money and with success is that they spent most of their time in the future. They were already there at the result of their actions, but in reality, in the present moment, procrastination was happening. They didn't want to do it because they didn't know how to enjoy the process. Of course, you need to keep the result in mind, but if you fixate on that result every day and dream about how you'll get from point 1 straight to point 10 without going through it, those 8 steps in between, where you might fall, where there could be failure, or you might make some mistake. People who are overly focused on results tend to avoid going through the path of a learner. That's what I would call it. They want to have this kind of montage. Point 0, where I'm not a professional yet and I don't have anything yet, and then suddenly tomorrow I'm already at 10. But between 0 and 10, there's a process. And if you don't enjoy the process and only dream about the result, in reality, you won't be able to go through those intermediate steps to your success. For example, I can mention a dancer performing on stage and the whole process of dancing. He's thinking about how he'll be applauded at the end. All his thoughts are focused on the result. Will he be able to dance his dance with inspiration and creativity? Of course not, because he has no interest in the process itself. And my advice is that to be able to earn money, learn to focus on the process and enjoy the very act of doing your work. Because, all the bestsellers we know were written without thinking about how they would become bestsellers or how they would sell. All bestsellers were written just for the drawer. That is, all creative people. And they say if you focus on the result and think about sales, nothing good comes out of it. Only commercial works are the exception. You've probably seen such things from writers and artists. This applies to any area of life, being able to be here and now and enjoying the process of what you are doing. And then receiving the results of your inspiration, your creativity, that's the formula for success and wealth. That's how it happened in my life too. You see, I've been working as a psychologist for over 20 years now, and you can imagine that people generally tell me about the same things. Over all these years, but every time I sit down and open the screen of my device where I connect with my clients, every time I'm interested, every time I'm engaged in the process, every time I'm curious about how the person speaks to me, how they blink, how they turn their head, how they move their hands. I'm interested in what they say, how they say it, and why they say it. Every time I'm in the process of my own research. That's why my profession brings me very good results. And of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel, share my videos on social media, give this video a like, and don't forget to leave a comment. Are you able to make money using my method? Some people are already using exactly this approach to your success. Or are there still some points that are dormant, inactive, or lagging behind, so to speak?